Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And things are going really well here in 2040 as we've reached the midway point of the season, gotten our mid-season evaluation from longtime owner John Fisher. Our A's at 53 and 29 are tied for the best winning percentage in the American League, and we have a 9-game lead on the Texas Rangers in the American League West. The one thing that's been a bit disappointing this year is that our A's, as I mentioned, having an outstanding season, ranked first out of 30 teams in the latest power rankings. We're a team that's won 2 out of the last 4 World Series, been in the playoffs 8 of the last 9 years, likely on our way to a 9th playoff appearance in 10 seasons. And unfortunately, our fan interest has eroded 4 points since the beginning of the season, from 98 to 94, which is making it difficult for us to push ticket prices too much and generate a little extra revenue. It's just kind of not intuitive to me that as we're heading into the summer and you have a team that is performing incredibly on the field, that fan interest would be declining. Typically, the summertime is when attendance is the strongest, particularly for teams that are contending. And definitely a little annoying that fan interest is deteriorating despite us putting a product on the field that I believe is meeting any and all expectations that we had when this season began. So I am investigating, as we get prepared for a relatively short episode, potential option to increase fan interest. Got a couple of trade offers that I've made that I'm waiting to hear back on. Not going to cover a ton of time ground in this episode. We're really just going to be simming about 2 weeks to the first-year player draft, and then we'll take a look at the players who are available in that draft for us before we get to the end of this episode. Going to be a interesting situation for us this year because although we're picking 33rd overall in the first round, we do have a supplemental pick, which will be 37th overall from the departure of our DH Juan Ramos this past offseason when he signed a big free agent contract. So the top prospects are going to be off the board by the time we are picking. But when we do review these prospects at the end of this episode, we're going to have 2 of the next 5 picks. So that should hopefully generate some lively debate and good discussion among the worldwide scouting department as to what path we should perhaps pursue. Other than that, though, we're going to be simming through the next couple weeks. We did our mid-season review last time around. Not a ton of holes on the team, but I will tease what I'm considering doing in the trade market. Mentioned was thinking about bringing on somebody who could boost our fan interest. And the one position in the lineup that I haven't been thrilled with this season is center field. So Avery Shayam recently brought up perhaps trying to upgrade that position with Walker Jenkins or someone else who's potentially a rental where we could upgrade from Sergio Palomares. That's also a theme that Bladestaff and others have brought up at times in the past. And the trades we're looking at could potentially help us in center field while also giving us a little bit of a boost in fan interest. We're a win-now team, so it's not going to be a completely costless trade if we end up executing on either of these transactions. We made the trade offers earlier today, so hopefully in the next couple of game days we'll hear back and be able to discuss the options with you. If there are some options and we're not just refused out of hand. And we've got an almost reaction to both of the trades that we put out there, so we'll talk about those shortly. But yesterday, the top 100 prospects list was released. Jonah Richards, who is going to be up with us shortly. I know some of you are getting impatient for him to join us, but my thought is we've got the best record, or tied for the best record in baseball right now. We're well on our way to a playoff appearance without Richards in the lineup. And at this point, he's looking for a massive contract. So he's not likely to be a guy that we're going to have for longer than his minimum salary and arbitration years. So my thought is we're going to keep him in the minors as long as possible. He will certainly be a September call-up. Very well may take over a prominent role in our lineup in September and likely be in the lineup with his left-handed bat, particularly against right-handed pitching in September and hopefully the playoffs. So he will be around soon. Number 5 prospect in baseball. We picked him up in that Amari Raphael trade with the Dodgers several years ago, and he has just blossomed into a much better prospect than we ever anticipated, hitting .319, 21 homers, 54 ribbies in a 172 WRC plus in AAA for us. He's a natural catcher, and he is going to be, I think, a very good catcher for us someday with 60 blocking and framing, 70 arm. We're trying to just improve his versatility for the near term while we still have the other excellent left-handed hitting catcher Mendoza on the team. So we're actually even playing him at third base right now. Now his range is so awful. I can't ever see us playing him there in the majors except for an emergency situation. But he could play first base from time to time with his 6'2" height. So Richards will be with us in not too long. Also interesting to see Gianfrancesco Lamborghini, who I know was a guy that we talked about over 5 seasons ago at this point when he was an IAFA prospect in 2035. And Lamborghini is now the number 2 prospect in baseball, hitting .278 with a 133 WRC plus in high A ball for the Kansas City Royals organization. And now we'll turn our attention to the 2 trade offers we made that are almost accepted by the teams, and given the pool of players that they are willing to accept to make these deals happen, definitely things that we can get done if we want. The trades are very similar. The cornerstone of both trades is trading away center fielder Sergio Palomares. He was a prime IAFA signing of ours in 2039. And a guy that we expected to be very good defensively with outstanding speed and being an excellent contact hitter who could generate a lot of extra base hits, draw some walks. He's been successful on some of those fronts and unsuccessful on some of those fronts. Over the course of his career, he's stolen 101 bases in 116 tries. He's on his way this season to his 3rd time in the last 4 years with over 30 steals. And he definitely has generated some extra base hits too with 102 doubles and 21 triples. He's been a good, solid player for us with an average of a 4 WAR over every 162 games he's played, aided by his speed and good defense. The fact that he's only been a .252 career hitter is a bit disappointing. Now his on-base percentage is almost exactly 100 points higher, so he has drawn a bunch of walks. But at one time, we felt that his contact was going to be significantly better than just a little bit above average. So all in all, over the course of his career, he's put up a 105 WRC plus, a good, solid major league center fielder. But ultimately, he hasn't been a huge difference maker for us, and he does have a few negative traits in the clubhouse. He's also a guy who's set to make over $6 million next year, given that even this year he's been in a platoon situation for us in center field. I don't know that we want to be spending $6 million on Gravedigger Palomares next year. In this trade with him, we'd also be including minor league first baseman Jamie Busa, former 10th round pick. Nice personality, but a marginal profile for a major leaguer. Reliever Luis Garza, who's just a 4A guy who's actually in AA for us this year. A lack of control, wrecked physically, but a good personality. And then 21-year-old minor league pitcher Juan Lima, who's done well the last couple years in rookie ball for us, but with that poor control isn't viewed as a significant prospect. And we'd have to add in one more player, but not a big-time prospect. In return, we would get a rental of the 35-year-old center fielder Walker Jenkins, who we mentioned last episode was one of the more interesting players on the trade block. There is a lot to like about Jenkins, and there's a lot not to like about Jenkins. What we like about him, he is a very good defensive center fielder with a decent bat, very good base running instincts, and over the course of his career, he's put up a 128 WRC plus and a 54 WAR. So a very productive offensive player, although over the last 4 years he's had a lot of injury issues, and the last 2 years he's basically been a league average offensive player. The other thing that we really like about Walker Jenkins is he's extremely popular and might be able to give us a nice little boost to what we're dealing with in terms of fan interest. Now, what don't we like about him? Well, he's 35 years old. He's making almost $19 million a year, although if you look closely at the deal, we structured it so Miami would keep the balance of it, had to add in a couple of extra players to make that happen. And he's wrecked physically, and as we've talked about, he hasn't been much more than a league average offensive player over the last couple of seasons, although still a positive WAR player thanks to his defense, but does give us another left-handed bat in the lineup. Right now our catcher Mendoza is the only lefty, and we have Landin and Ortega as switch hitters. And his ratings indicate that he's still pretty effective against right-handed pitching. We wouldn't play him against left-handed pitching. That would hopefully give him some rest and maybe keep him healthy. But still a pretty good bat against right-handed pitching. And when we look at his splits this year, that's borne out. He's got a 65 WRC plus against southpaws, but he still does have a 130 WRC plus this year, with 7 homers in 146 at-bats and a 308 average against right-handed pitching. So as a rental, I think that Jenkins would be an upgrade for Palomares, playing center field against right-handed pitching. He'd actually be a little bit of an upgrade defensively overall, and he'd certainly give the team a boost in fan interest if we bring him on board. The issue is that he's a 1-year rental, and we'd be losing Palomares to bring him on board, and he's 35 years old and he's wrecked physically. A similar profile to Jake Ortega, who we're specifically not playing in center field because we want to keep him healthy. Since we've got Ortega at DH, we would have to be running Walker Jenkins out into center field for us, and given his age and his lack of health, even with the fact that he'd be platooning and only playing against right-handed pitching, I don't think there's any guarantee that a player that is his age, wrecked physically, and hasn't played anything resembling a full season in 5 years at this point, it's hard to imagine he's going to be healthy and up to the rigors of playing everyday center field for us over the next 3 months if we bring him on board. But certainly could roll the dice and hope that he stays healthy. Think he would be productive against right-handed pitching. And as we noted, think he'd also give us the boost in fan interest that we've been desiring. And the other trade offer for a left-handed hitting center fielder who didn't happen to be on the trade block but is also in the final year of his contract is also similar. Centered on Palomares, and the minor league first baseman Jamie Busa also has to be included. 4A infielder Kamani Glincy, nice personality, but obviously no restrictions on including somebody like him in the deal. And then a 22-year-old center fielder, Albert Serrato, decent-looking prospect, good personality, definitely more of a corner outfielder, but we think he could have slightly above average contact and home run power when all is said and done. Having a really nice year in A-ball for us with a 296 average, 14 homers, 33 ribbies, in 189 at-bats with a ridiculous 188 WRC plus and a 2.4 WAR already. But not a huge time prospect. So a broadly similar package, and we do have to add in another player, which we'd be happy to do to get the deal done. The Padres would only be retaining 95% of this contract rather than 100%. But by including Palomares and what he's making, still a little bit of overall salary relief for us. If we were to try to bring on the center fielder Kamani Ibekwe, as I mentioned, left-handed hitting center fielder, very popular rather than extremely popular, so not quite as popular as Jenkins, but he is durable rather than wrecked physically. So that is something to definitely like about him. Ibekwe, low leadership, low loyalty, so not necessarily the best influence in the clubhouse, but we've got a strong enough clubhouse that I think we could handle that. Not quite as good defensively as Jenkins is. His error rating is materially lower. Also has pretty good base running instincts and a solid, albeit not incredible, hitting profile. Over the course of Ibekwe's career, he's put up a 108 WRC plus, so he hasn't nearly been the type of offensive player that Walker Jenkins has been over the course of his career. Is a two-time Gold Glove winner and was an All-Star back in 2037. Looking at his ratings, however, he also is a little bit better against right-handed pitching, not the same dramatic splits that Jenkins has, but when you look at these ratings, a little more gap power and a little more home run power against right-handed pitching. Looking at his batting splits for this year, however, he's really had a brutal season, hitting .231 below average against lefties and a brutal .171 batting average with just a 54 WRC plus against righties. We do have a scouting report on him from just a week and a half ago, so I think largely his lack of production this year is just pretty bad luck. His BABIP is just 224. Given that his BABIP rating is still above average, he's a line drive hitter. I think he's probably just gotten unlucky. So I think Ibekwe is a little bit of an upgrade from Palomares. Does give us another left-handed bat in the lineup, which helps a little bit. He is durable. But the fact that Ibekwe has been struggling so hard this year definitely makes me a little more reticent about potentially bringing him up bringing him on board in a similar trade to Jenkins. So Jenkins certainly hasn't lit it up offensively this year, but we looked at the ratings and what he's done this year. I think Jenkins will hit well against right-handed pitching. The question is whether he's going to be healthy and in the lineup. Ibekwe, with that durability, I think will be healthy and in the lineup. Would give us another left-handed bat, but probably a smaller upgrade offensively over Palomares than Jenkins would be. Not quite as good defensively. But again, despite the fact that he's been brutal offensively this season, particularly against right-handed pitching, when I look at the core ratings, 60 contact, 60 gap power, 55 home run power, and 60 I, it's hard for me to make the case that that's not an upgrade over Palomares. Palomares is a little bit worse in terms of his contact and much worse in terms of his home run power, while being slightly better in terms of gap power and his eye. Pretty similar defensive players. Palomares is also only well known, so there is potential that if we brought Ibekwe on board, that we'd get a little bit of a boost to fan interest. Palomares similarly has some negative personality traits, but he is better on the base paths. So interesting decisions for us to think about. The other thing with potentially trading away Palomares, our outfield has been very deep and getting much younger the last couple of years. But if we trade away Palomares and then most likely move on from Jake Ortega this upcoming offseason, leaves us with Selvey in left field, Arturo Uresti in right field, and then Joe Harmon is our center fielder. And Harmon is a former second-round draft pick. Good speed, really good defensively, positive personality. Although he has a 125 WRC plus this year and good contact, I don't think the bat is particularly special. But when we think about 2041, if we were to make one of these trades of Palomares, that takes Palomares out of potentially being in the mix for us next year. Now, no guarantee that we want to be spending him $6 million on him to potentially platoon with Harmon or maybe even be a fourth outfielder. But with the likely potential departure of Ortega and trading Palomares away for a rental, we are in a situation where we're kind of weakening the back of our outfield. Now, Luis Godina, who's played first base for us this year, is a competent-ish corner outfielder who could certainly be in the mix to help out in left or right field, because presumably he'll be losing playing time to Richards later this year and could still lose time to an Alcindor or Toribio or Richards going forward. So Godina gives us one guy that we could pivot into the outfield. If we keep Andy Toribio around as a utility guy, he could certainly play a competent left or right field. But we're certainly potentially weakening our outfield depth for next year if we trade away Palomares, and we're definitely weakening us in center field. Right now on the team, we've got Ortega, Palomares, and I don't know why I'm blanking on Harmon's name all of a sudden, but Ortega, Palomares, and Harmon, who can all play a very high-quality center field if we need. Next year, we could be look at only having Harmon in the mix as a potential center fielder if we were to trade away Palomares. So I think that if I could be guaranteed that Jenkins was going to remain healthy, that's a clear upgrade for us at center field against right-handed pitching, and also perhaps helps us with the fan interest, as we mentioned. But there's no guarantee that a Rec 35-year-old is going to remain healthy. If I could guarantee that Kimani Ibekwe would hit against right-handed pitching as his ratings suggest he should, rather than the way he's hit against right-handed pitching this year, that would be a nice upgrade for us as well. Palomares with a 106 WRC plus this year, but as we talked about, 105 for his career. So he has been a little worse than Ibekwe over the course of his career. He has been below average against right-handed pitchers this year too, which is where we've been playing him more often than not. He's actually been more productive in the limited action he's had against left-handed pitching. Ibekwe, potentially a small boost to fan interest bringing him on board. But similar to Jenkins, also a pure rental, and we're losing control of Palomares through his arbitration years if we move on from him. And I'm just not confident right now that either of these moves is a big enough upgrade that we want to pull the trigger quite yet. Could definitely use some thoughts from the worldwide scouting department on the options in front of us. Would you stick with Palomares? Would you rent Ibekwe? Or would you rent Walker Jenkins? I think before I started the episode, I was leaning towards making the trade for Ibekwe. I think a day ago in real time, I was leaning towards doing Walker Jenkins. And as I sit here right now, after having talked through the details in person with you over the last 10, 15 minutes, I think I might be leaning towards just keeping Palomares on board, as I'm not confident that either move is a big enough upgrade. But I could definitely be swayed in any direction, and I don't think both of these players are going to come off the market in the next week. I don't think the prices of either of these players is going to change dramatically over the next week or two as we go through this episode and get closer to the amateur draft. So my thought is I might be able to harness the wisdom of the worldwide scouting department on the debate between whether Palomares, Jenkins, or Ibekwe should be our center fielder against right-handed pitchers for the remainder of this season. And as the calendar is turned to July, I got a decision to make on Chase Dora, a longtime starter for us who we picked up in a big trade almost exactly 4 years ago with the Reds. 6-2 with a 3.86 ERA for us this year as our number 2 starter. Just put him largely preventatively on a IL stint briefly. Back healthy now, and he hasn't really even been gone long enough that I think he needs a rehab assignment. In his final year with us, going to be looking for big money after this season. Certainly we'll be bringing him back up to the major league roster, but we do have a decision now what to do with the rotation. We'll send Mike Bennett down to AAA to make room for Dora. The question is, who do we take out of the rotation to make room for Dora? Our 4th starter, Dave Baumler, with a 4.67 ERA is kind of the obvious choice, the only starter we have with a losing record this year. But as we've talked about previously, Baumler is also our only captain personality, so kind of would like to keep him in that role going forward to the extent that we can. Federico Ariola is certainly a huge part of our future. Just called him up, and he's 2-1 with a 3.94 ERA in his first 3 starts. Ernesto Comunez, I think, is an important part of our future as a starter, too. He's also a youngster who's been in the bullpen this entire year. Comunez has actually signed an extension with us. Ariola's looking for crazy money, so he has not. I think at this point, we're going to put Arriola into the bullpen. He's certainly a very talented pitcher. I think he can potentially help us there. We also have recently moved Mike Orozco out of that stopper role where he was doing very high volume but not being particularly effective, and now have him as a setup guy with Mendick and Scherer, trying to maybe share the workload a little easier among those three players. Until Dora really fails for us, though, he's a strong veteran presence as our number two starter, and we'll try to ensure that we get both Arriola and Comunez some work. And who knows, maybe if working out of the bullpen doesn't anger Arriola, maybe it'll make his contract demands be a little more reasonable, and perhaps down the line in the next few months we might be able to get him signed to an extension that we think is more reasonable than what he's been asking for previously. And as we pop through the screens recently, some of you probably noticed that fan interest has dipped another point to 93. Again, it just does not make a lot of sense to me that we're heading into the summer. You've got a team that's in first place by 9 games, won 2 of the last 4 World Series, has a lineup that is stacked to try to win against this year. And the interest of the fans is somehow deteriorating just as the weather is getting nice and the pennant races are heating up. And we did get a PM from Jake Ortega a couple days ago that he's still interested in signing an extension. Unfortunately, no change at all in his demands. Looking for 6 years at over $200 million. Player option for the final season when he'll be turning 39 years old. Given that at this point we're using him solely as a DH and he's wrecked physically, certainly not even a contract level that I would entertain. If the demand comes down somewhat in terms of years and dollars over the next few months, I'd love to have our former 3rd overall pick in the draft, who's already won 2 MVP awards with us, and despite a relatively late start to his career and despite some significant injuries in recent years, is still on his way to a borderline Hall of Fame type career. Would love to have him spend his whole career in Oakland, but at the money he's looking for right now, I don't think it's practical. But things can change. And we've made it to the first year player draft. Just a quick look at the standings. The Rangers have been playing pretty well, and we've been a 500 team for most of the last couple of weeks. So our lead in the division is down to 7.5 games. That said, we're still half a game ahead of Minnesota for the best record in the American League, and still trailing only the Nationals for the best record in baseball. As we sit here on July 11th, magic number down to 63 to win the division. Jake Ortega still running away with the American League lead in steals with 46 steals, has tied his career high set a couple years ago when he led the league. And he's been caught just 5 times on the base paths this season. Doug Weiss, second in the American League with 11 wins. And our closer, Chuck Huntley, is 3rd in the American League with 22 saves as we sit here 3 weeks away from the trade deadline. But right now, our attention is going to turn to that first year player draft. Mentioned that we're not going to be picking until 33 and 37. So unlikely that any of the top 10 prospects will be around, but we'll take a quick look at who the experts think the top prospects are. Second baseman Jeremy Finley certainly looks like an outstanding bat. Has some work to do with his glove. Deshaun Pullum, a college center fielder out of High Point, respectable defensively and a very interesting bat, like the durability for Pullum. Garrick Walker, another second baseman, 18-year-old, some real positive personality traits, and I think he could be a pretty good power-hitting, right-handed hitting second baseman. Amari Osby, a college shortstop out of Alcorn State. Really nice speed, excellent bunter, Looks like he could be a pretty solid third baseman or first baseman at the major league level. Could definitely play some other positions, and think his bat could be a little bit above average at just about everything. Halen Laguna, 18-year-old center fielder, pretty good contact hitting prospect. Sam Miller, another second baseman, high schooler, 18 years old, outstanding contact hitting prospect with some positive personality traits, although he's going to want to get paid. Jonathan Foster, another college player out of Bowling Green, looks like he could be a pretty solid utility infielder type if he reaches his full potential. Could be a pretty good starting infielder. Alejandro Lozano, 18-year-old shortstop. Decent speed and a potentially decent bat. Chris Karen, another second baseman, potentially outstanding gap power and home run power. A little older than most high schoolers at 19 years old already. And last but not least, Mason Jumba, another second baseman. Looks like he could have a really interesting bat, decent speed, couple of personality quirks, and has some work to do defensively. Again, not necessarily expecting any of these top 10 players are going to be around when we are on the clock, but wanted to give a quick overview of them for those of you who are interested in these kinds of things. So there's no point in us prolonging the pain of having to wait till our 33rd pick in the draft. We'll go ahead, get the draft started, and we will auto draft up into our pick and take a look now at some of the top prospects that are available. As I mentioned, we had a long wait till the 33rd overall pick for our first pick, but now we do have the advantage of having this upcoming pick where Bobby Farrer is the guy that's been mocked to us, and then 4 picks after that we'll be back on the clock where starting pitcher David Esparza has been mocked to us. And not surprisingly, looking at the top of the draft, a lot of the guys that we talked about went right near the top. The college players, particularly popular. Amari Osby out of Alcorn State, Deshaun Pullum out of High Point, and Jonathan Foster out of Bowling Green went with three of the top 4 picks. Other names that we talked about, Mason Jumba, Jeremy Finley, Chris Karen, also off the board. But we still are going to have an interesting pool of players that we can potentially pick from here. Taking a look at some of the top hitting prospects that are out there, our scout sees 4 of them with ceilings that kind of stand out compared to the rest. Catcher Steve Jackson looks competent-ish defensively. Certainly would like our catchers to be better than that. But looks like he could have a really interesting left-handed hitting bat. Think his contact, gap power, and home run power could all be well above average. Could also play him at first base if we had to with that 6'8 height, 35 range. Not the most talented defensive player. Not going to lie, a 6'8", 200-pound catcher I think would be a bit of a quirk in terms of the history of Major League Baseball, but certainly an interesting bat with the left-handed hitting Mr. Jackson. First baseman Eric Tashida, another high school prospect, 17-year-old. We think his home run power could be world-class. Not going to draw a ton of walks, but that 80 home run power is certainly interesting to consider, particularly given that we think his contact could be slightly above average as well. Another 5-star potential prospect, Chris Tabat, a third baseman. Like the durability, definitely has some work to do defensively. At 6'4", he could certainly play first base. Could play him in left field if you had to, but I wouldn't like doing that. Pretty interesting hitting prospect, though. Potentially well above average home run power with contact and gap power that both could be above average as well. Little older. He's going to be turning 19 years old later this month. And then the guy that was mocked to us is the final five-star potential prospect who's still on the board. That's the third baseman, Bobby Ferrer. Switch hitting third baseman. Has some work to do defensively, but does have a really nice arm at third base. I think his home run power could be exceptional. His gap power well above average, and a good eye. The question with Ferrer is how much contact is he going to make? I think he's going to strike out a ton, and just getting the ball into play is going to be a potentially pretty significant issue for him. So I don't think any of the top-rated hitters are clear great prospects. There is one other four-star prospect in terms of potential that we'll also look at, left fielder Braden Goodman, 18-year-old, good contact hitter, decent home run power if he fully develops, not a ton of speed. Looks like a prototypical corner outfielder with that profile. And there are still a few higher-end pitching prospects on the board as well. Mike Taylor is a reliever, only 30 stamina, only a two-pitch arsenal right now, given that we think his movement and his control are unlikely to be much better than Major League average and could both end up well below Major League average. Despite the outstanding stuff that we think he has, hard for me to imagine us going after Mikey Taylor with a first-round pick. The other four players are listed as starting pitchers, though, so hopefully there's someone a bit more interesting there. Starting pitcher Sean Shumate, also known as Spider. High leadership, adaptability, and work ethic. Potential 5-pitch arsenal, although it could very well be a 4-pitch arsenal if that changeup doesn't develop. Don't really think he's going to have any real dominant pitches. Think his stuff, his movement and control are all kind of average. But the 6-foot, 170-pound lefty is a guy who I might be more interested in the second or third round. Hard for me to imagine he's a guy we'd go after with a first-round pick. Starting pitcher Steve Hart, another lefty, throws a bit harder, throws in the low to mid-90s already. Only a potential 3-pitch arsenal, and again, we don't think his stuff is particularly impressive. Do think that his movement and his control could get a bit above average. Outstanding at holding on runners and decent stamina with extreme ground ball tendencies. Think he could be a useful major leaguer. I can't say that I'm in love with him as a prospect. Another high school pitcher, Gil Cates, another left-hander. Another guy whose stuff just isn't that impressive. He's got a potential 4-pitch arsenal, but outside of the changeup, we don't think any of them are really going to be average major league quality. Doesn't throw incredibly hard, isn't even touching 90 on the radar gun yet. So we think his control could be exceptional and his movement above average, but the stuff potentially not that great. Does have extreme ground ball tendencies and some positive personality traits. Last but not least, another starting pitcher who's a left-hander, and he's the highest ceiling prospect, at least according to our scout. That's the 6'4" left-hander John Bramblett. Potential 5-pitch arsenal, but he's got a lot of work to do. Do like that we think his curveball could be well above average to mix in with some more average pitchers. I think reaching his true potential is definitely going to be reliant on developing that changeup. Really nice personality with high adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence, low financial ambition. Very good stamina, outstanding at holding on runners. Doesn't throw incredibly hard. The 18-year-old barely touching 90 on the radar gun at this point. Think that his stuff and his control could both be a bit above average when all is said and done, to go with average movement. He's going to allow you to hit the ball, but we think he'll generally keep it in the park pretty well. I think Bramblett on an initial look is probably my favorite of that crew, but can't say that I'm in love with anyone who's available right now. We'll look at a couple more developed college players that I guess we could consider in the mix as well. Shortstop Dan Wiederman, pretty interesting defensively. Not a ton of speed. A guy who looks like he's going to strike out a lot, but could hit a fair amount of home runs. The right-handed hitter out of Stephen F. Austin University. Loreno Ezekiel Young, first baseman out of the Ohio State University. Doesn't look like all that interesting a bat to me. Not the highest ceiling on him. And then Jeff Bearline out of UC Santa Barbara, third baseman, who's got some work to do defensively, and I think he could be a decent contact hitter, but not really bring too much else to the table. So it seems like a year where we might be inclined to go with a high schooler with a higher ceiling than reaching for a college player at number 33 that doesn't necessarily have big time major league potential. And there also are a fair number of 3.5-star potential hitting prospects out there. I'll kind of highlight the ones for the Worldwide Scouting Department that I find the most interesting. Shortstop Juan Bracamontes looks like he could have a decent major league bat. He's durable, and he's already got a decent glove. So the 6'4" right-handed hitting shortstop is someone who I think merits a little bit of consideration. Couple other infielders that stood out to at least think about to me. Second baseman Greg Montz, potentially really interesting contact hitter who is decent defensively. Shortstop Mike Pardo, 18-year-old, potentially outstanding gap power with really good home run power, pretty good speed, and a glove that for an 18-year-old is at a pretty good spot at this point. Another shortstop, Doug Ramos, decent glove as well, and another guy with a nice gap power, home run power combination, although the speed to really take advantage of that gap power not necessarily there in the case of Ramos as much as it is with Pardo. And three final guys that are a little interesting to me. Shortstop Jake Reed. Looks like he could have a respectable major league bat, and he is a very versatile potential defensive player. High leadership, work ethic, low financial ambition. A guy who definitely looks like he could play pretty much any field on any position on the field except for catcher. Wouldn't necessarily love him in center field, but a versatile defensive player. Catcher Randy Russell, a 17-year-old, like our initial thoughts on his glove, and think that he could have a right-handed bat with a little bit of home run pop when all is said and done. And one outfielder in the mix as well, center fielder Chris Wilde, 19-year-old, who's committed to Wake Forest. Pretty respectable defensively, and we think he could have outstanding gap power and home run power if he completely develops. So definitely a lot of interesting names for us to think about. I can't say, based on this initial view of who's available for us, that I've got an incredibly strong first take. But I'll be spending a lot of time thinking about it offline between now and the next episode, and hoping that as the Worldwide Scouting Department often does, that the Worldwide Scouting Department will come through with some good suggestions for me as to perhaps a strategy over the next 5 picks in the draft. And also, if you've got any thoughts on what we should do in center field. Do we keep Palomares, or do we trade him away to rent an aging and decrepit Walker Jenkins or a struggling Ibekwe. And would love thoughts on that from anyone who's inclined to share them as well. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.